Alright, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So I've kind of defaulted to my old setup a little bit. I don't think anyone's probably going to notice any tangible differences from the usual recording stream setup, but thought I'd just mention it offhand just in case anyone did notice something odd. So it's been a while since I've done one of these kinds of videos, just because mostly I haven't been as invested in One Piece itself or the Wano arc overall. So I haven't really felt as inspired as I used to kind of make these kind of theory speculation videos. But now I figured since we are getting into what seems like the supposedly or seeming climax of the Wano arc, I figured what the hell, might as well give it a shot and then kind of try to kind of fuck, my brain's already dying on me. Kind of talk about what I feel like is still left unaddressed at this point in the story that makes me think that there is a fake out coming with the raid, and that Oda's kind of pulling one out from under us, and that the Wano arc still has a lot more to go before we get to the actual true climax of it. Because as the title has suggested to you, this video is going to be about, is this the end of Wano as we know it? Because the Straw Hats are doing way too fine, and I think that's one of the big criticisms slash things that feels kind of off to me so far about the climax thus far, which we'll kind of get into later, but I'll just kind of mention here, is it doesn't really feel like a typical climax from any other arc. Which isn't to say that Oda couldn't be doing something different with this one, etc., whatever. I'm not really going to get into that, but this is one of the complaints I've kind of had of the Wano arc since it began. Is the Straw Hats and the rest of their allies feel like they've been really, really lackadaisical in their attitudes. The Straw Hats, especially, not really their allies as much in their approach to fighting two emperors of the sea. And especially when we're supposed to be getting into the climax, against the underdogs, against these forces that supposedly outnumber them. It doesn't feel like there's any tension or stakes or any kind of emotional investment in this arc, which is so atypical of Oda. Feels like something must be, like this has to be some kind of twist or something coming. So I decided, what the hell, I'll try to kind of go through my thoughts about what is still left unanswered within the arc, and do a little bit of theory positing on how it could potentially play out or be addressed. So some minor disclaimers that first of all I want to mention before we dive into it. I am not going to pull what a majority of the fandom does and kind of have this unwarranted faith in Oda that we will eventually get answers to these questions. You have to trust in Oda. He has a grand plan. You just have to have faith in him. That ship has sailed for me like many, many arcs ago, so I'm not going to have the same kind of faith, especially when I've seen how many people have defended Smoothie's lackluster performance thus far in the story overall, and kind of how people keep snapping back that, oh, Smoothie's going to have her chance, she'll really shine at some point in the future arc, oh, we'll see, Big Mom story's not over yet. So I'm not going to get into any of that. Right now, what I'm going to focus on is what Oda has or hasn't given us, and that's what I'm going to criticize and analyze. If at any point in the future that changes and he reveals some heretofore unknown master plan, I am more than willing to walk back my words. I've said in several videos before, so I just want to put that out there as the first one. And the second being, I know the theorists have a very bad rap in the One Piece community, and anyone that has expectations also has a really bad rap in the community, because you can't expect anything from Oda because he likes to surprise you, and well, if you try to predict him, you're going to be let down, and that'll just make your experience of the story even worse, because you won't be able to objectively see what Oda has planned. I'm not going to get into why that was all complete bullcrap, but just to say that anything I posit here, if we do not get answers to it, I'm not going to use that as an excuse to start bashing the Wano arc and say, oh, the Wano arc is so shit because Oda didn't answer this, Oda didn't answer that, he didn't tell me about this, he didn't tell me about that. I'm not going to pull any of that. I can criticize the Wano arc on its own merits or its own shortcomings, of which there are many. Trust me, there's so much about this arc you can talk about what Oda has or hasn't done well. So I just want to put that out there. I'm not going to bash the arc if none of my theories come true. I will base it purely on how well the story was told in the arc. So those are the two things I kind of wanted to cover. And so, before I dive into it, I think I'll just give everyone kind of an overview of what topics I really want to cover in this video before we dive into each one individually and specifically. So it's basically, I think, at least 3 or so things I want to talk about. So first is going to be basically what I call the pre-Wano foreshadowing and setup. So this will be mostly items with regards to things we heard at Reverie or during the interludes between acts that Oda was setting up in the world at large, either related to Wano or tangentially related to events at Wano and therein. It'll also cover some post-Dressrosa and post Whole Cake Island stuff somewhat, because if memory serves me correctly, I think there was a few interrelated things happening there that I just want to quickly address. And then, so the next thing I'll talk about is will be with regards to somewhat of an outlier, which will be dealing with swords and souls and how that kind of ties into Zora's development. But the latter part might be something I just split off into its own video, the Zora development part, because when I was writing up the script for this video specifically, I tried to start getting into the Zoro ideas for what his end game arc looks like, based on what we know about Shiryu and everything else now, and fan speculation. But it was getting a little bit too long, digressing a little bit too much from what I wanted to talk about and focus on with Wano specifically. So I feel like I'll probably just make that into its own separate video if I feel like there's enough there to warrant it. And then the next one will be plot points and or themes introduced in Wano itself that I feel like Oda needs to address. And then lastly, I want to talk about what I'm going to term the extraneous events that will be tied to the aforementioned few topics in the various ways, but not really direct correlations to them. So before I start really diving into it, minor warning, I may from time to time digress when I'm exploring or talking about various ideas, because it just may ping off of prior ideas and theories I've had. So do forgive me if I start rambling a little bit and it seems like I'm going off topic, because once I tend to dive down these rabbit holes, it does kind of put me down deeper and deeper, because I've had so many interrelated theories for the longest time, and they haven't really been definitively proved or disproved yet. So I'm kind of still waiting to see how well I may have picked up on or recognized what Oda's plans or things were. So bear with me if that happens. But with that said, let's dive into the pre-Wano content first. So I think these are ideas I've addressed multiple times before, I think in a couple of my older videos, but I want to reiterate them here because it has been literal months, I think, since I've done one of these. I cannot even legitimately remember when the last theory speculation One Piece video I did even was, and I doubt anyone else really remembers it unless they're like a super fan or such. So because of that, I'll kind of reiterate those ideas first. And so there's really two separate, but in my opinion, kind of interrelated events to talk about with regards to this. And the first one is obviously the fallout from Dressrosa and the post-arc stuff, where we see Koala reporting to Dragon about the weapon smuggling that was going on, that they were sent to Dressrosa to investigate. Because we knew that Doflamingo Kaido had the Smiles Devil Fruit, the Smile Devil Fruit's weapons exchange, and Doflamingo was using those weapons, smuggling them out to various countries as an arms broker. And remember, just as a refresher for anyone that doesn't, that the revolutionaries took the ones that they had in Dressrosa at the time back to Baltigo with them. And this is one specific point I want to first mention. Yeah, this is a specific point. First point I want to mention with regards to this is when Koala reported to Dragon about the weapons. She mentioned the first kind of bit of special foreshadowing, which was the metal that the weapons were made out of were called drunken iron ore, and she pointed out that this metal or this ore could only be found in a very select few countries, which would kind of help narrow down the field to kind of find out where the factories were, where they're being produced, so they could shut them down. And then after that, they got sidelined with the Blackbeard and his forces kind of showing up to raise Baltigo to the ground. And then after that, because of Reverie starting, we know the revolutionaries got sidelined with that as well. With Sabo and the other revolutionary commanders going in there to free Kuma, and I think it was declare war on the world governor of Celestial Dragons, one or the other, I can't specifically remember which. So, because of that, with whatever mess is going on with Sabo, this could very well end up being an issue that resolves itself by the end of Wano, without the revolutionaries involving themselves, just because I assume that when the Strawhats do finally manage to defeat Kaido and restore Wano to, its rightful rulers, etc., etc., excuse me, I assume the weapons factories will be shut down, the arms smuggling trade will be cut off, problem will be solved without really needing revolutionary involvement. But we'll have to see, because I feel like, the fact that Oda specifically mentioned that the metal that the weapons are made of is very rare, and they can use this to pin down and kind of identify where it came from, seems like something he's going to bring up or address at some point in the story. It doesn't feel like an odd detail you just kind of include just for, the sake of kind of dressing it up the story or expanding the lore a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what answer, if any, we get for that and how it ties in. And I think this was the other curious element that I think a lot of people kind of forget about because of how long ago it happened. But we remember Caribou's cover story when we find out that he washed up on Kaido's island, and then he got mistaken for a revolutionary leader there called Gabaru, who was seemed to have been based on Che Guevara, a famous revolutionary. And this could have just been Oda making like a haha joke and smirk smirk wink wink reference to that revolutionary thing, like the weapons factories and stuff and all that. But I wonder if that's going to actually be kind of the way he launches in or brings in the revolutionaries' involvement in the actual arc itself, by having, revealing that, haha, jokes aside, Gabaru was actually a part of the revolutionary army at some point, and that, he was the one that they snuck into Wano, just like Koala and Sabo snuck into Dressrosa. I wonder if they sent in a revolutionary into Wano to kind of do the same thing, to try to smuggle out reports, to try to find out what's going on, because it is a closed nation. So I wonder if Oda will ever bring that back at any point or not. Because Caribou, as much as I dislike him, the fact that he does know about Poseidon and everything else means he's going to have some larger part to play in the story going forward. Even though I don't think we haven't seen him since the raid started, or even after they broke out. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what role he plays, if any. But don't want to get too much into my speculation on that, because until the raid progresses further, it's really hard to kind of really speculate or predict anything, just because there is enough information to kind of go off of. But it's an interesting point. I thought I'd just bring it up just because it kind of sparked in my head. I thought someone else might find it interesting as well. And especially wanted to address this part, the next bit I'm going to mention first, because it ties into other elements within Wano itself. And so come to the second outstanding pre-Wano point. And this one's a little bit shorter than the other one was, because it kind of really has a lot to do with Reverie, which we didn't get enough of because Oda kind of just teased a little bit of the events and he didn't really get into kind of the geopolitics of it, which I was disappointed by. It's neither here or there. But again, I found it super curious of the fact that when we were at Reverie and we saw the kings coming to the round table, kind of gathering, mingling, doing all that stuff, there was very pointed discussion about Wano specifically there. As we see some of the kings and queens talking about how Wano's a lawless land, and oh, can it even be counted as a nation? And there's also the offhand mention of like, oh, the world government, the Marines, needed more funds because the Navy doesn't run on thin air. And then this made me start wondering that if the need for these funds have come about as a result of the world conscription we heard about that the new fleet admiral Sakazuki put in at the beginning, or no, during Dressrosa we heard about that's how Fujitora and Green Bull got put in. And I also wondered if the new science group that Vegapunk is part of, which they built these new weapons to replace the warlords, I wonder if that's what kind of sucked in all the funds for the World Government Marines, and it's kind of shortchanging them right now. But that's neither here nor there. What I want to point out about that, why that seemed important to me, is because we've now established there is a need for funds for the world government and the Marines, and they need some kind of way to get those funds. And so we'll come back to that plot point later. I just want to bring it up so everyone kind of gets it into their head. Which brings me to the next point on my list of outstanding points within Wano. And the first of those is the cursed swords. So I have been a huge proponent of numerous theories. Yeah, I know I said the bad word, capital T theories. Oh no. But regarding, speculating on whether the souls of inanimate objects could potentially become, awakened, for lack of a better word. And I was hoping this would kind of lead to some Zoro development in this arc, which there has been a lack of so far. And I'll admit odds of that are seeming slimmer as we're getting deeper into the arc, especially at the point we are at now. But I'll go over to some of the speculations anyway, just so everyone kind of has an idea of what my thought process was and what I was thinking, why I was thinking this way. So the cursed sword bit really goes all the way back to Logue Town when Zoro first got the Sandai Kitetsu from Ippon Matsu and did the whole badass, let's see which is stronger. The sword's cursed for my luck, as he throws the sword up and it avoids nicking him before it plants itself, slices into the ground with a super sharp edge. And then we see, in the subsequent arcs after that, him talking about the sword having a personality or a mind of its own. We see it in Whiskey Peak, where he's taking on the 100 bounty hunters, and he slices through it. I think it was someone was holding a rock hammer, and the sword just slices cleanly through it. And he's like, holy shit, the sword is insanely sharp. And he had to stop her from gutting one of the kids that was a bounty hunter as well. That's when he kind of first mentions that, a sword can't just cut willy-nilly whatever it wants. It has to only cut what his master tells it to and nothing else. And then we again see hints of it again in Water 7 when he's stuck in the chimney and Chopper comes up to him with the swords. And Zoro, without even being able to see it because he's stuck head first into the chimney, goes, hey Chopper, do you have the Kitetsu with you? Chopper's like, yeah, how did you know? And Zoro's like, I could sense there's something off about that sword, give it to me. And then, because I am a huge Tashigi stan, I have to bring her up, because I can't talk about this without mentioning her. Because in Logue Town as well, she mentioned her dream was to take away swords from people that are unworthy, because the swords must be crying when used for evil. So ever since then, it's kind of sparking in my head and me thinking so the question then became, is there more to this apart from a cool thematic idea? Is Oda have some plan that he's been waiting to execute? And like I said, I won't get too much into the personal theories regarding what I personally think about it. So I'll just mention the Going Merry being able to manifest spirit with the Klabauterman. and Zoro unlocking what I basically coined or termed as the breath of all things, which was a callback to his fight with Mr. One. Made me wonder if Oda is going to explore what it means to be a true swordsman apart from just being super strong. Like, is there going to be some kind of philosophical or thematic element to it? This is kind of like, one of the reasons I love Alabasta so much, and I'm a little bit disappointed with kind of a lot of the post arc stuff that happened with it, and really the arcs following, because back then the coolest aspect of his fight with Mr. One was how he talks about how he senses, all the breathing of the breath or like the heartbeat of all the objects around him. And you get the feeling, because the entire fight with Mr. One up to that point had been Zoro trying to hit him as hard as he could to cut through the steel with just pure brute force, and none of that was working because Mr. One's steel was just too hard for him to cut through. And as soon as he's at death's door, and he's able to unlock his ability to start sensing kind of the life force and the breathing, as he terms it, of all these objects, that's when he's kind of just able to effortlessly slice through Mr. One and decisively end the battle. Ever since then, we haven't really gotten back to that kind of fundamental element anymore, where it seems like Zoro just, we always just see Zoro training and bulking up, and it seems like he's just cutting through everything with brute force now. So I don't know if this is going to be, like, I'm hoping that Oda does do a little bit more philosophical stuff with the swordsman thing, but what shape, if any, it'll take, I don't know. But that was a digression. Let's get back to what I was talking about with regards to the cursed swords, because the reason I kind of wanted to bring this up in this video specifically was it was one of the very first things that Oda brings up as a plot point as soon as we get to Wano, is Luffy taking a sword from Hitetsu, which, again, small digression. I want to point out that we have Hitetsu, Kotetsu, and Kitetsu now, and we have confirmation that Hitetsu built the 3rd generation Kitetsu. I assume his ancestor built the 2nd generation Kitetsu, and I assume Kotetsu was Kitetsu's ancestor, Kitetsu was Kotetsu's ancestor. He built the original one. But yeah, so that point aside, like, the point being that Hitetsu warns Luffy not to take the sword as it's cursed. And when Luffy's like, "Oh, give me your sword, I'll take yours instead," and he's like, Hitetsu's like, "No, I can't give you that one. I don't want to take your cursed blade," which makes me wonder if at least part of the reason that Luffy was so easily beaten by Kaido and all the other events that played around him were because of the curse's influence. Because we kind of established, again, way back early in the series, that Luffy is supremely lucky. We saw this in his fight with Crocodile, where, he's able to spit up the water right before Crocodile dries him out and gets back to, and he's able to, like, reabsorb it back into himself. Or just like all the other stuff where he just seems to have really, really good luck. And we saw, again, with the call back to Zoro, we saw it again where he says, let's see which is stronger, my luck or its curse. So I wonder if there's points at which the curse can start outweighing the luck and start overriding and influencing it, kind of leading them to the places where it gets this downfall. Because we know very specifically that the Kitetsus are known for being cursed swords, because everyone who wields it has met some kind of untimely death. So I wonder if that was part of what happened with Luffy, is whether the curse kind of just amplified all of his bad luck and caused him to get into a fight with Kaido at that point, and caused him to get beaten and, put into prison again. But that's all speculation at this point. And I just want to build on this by saying, Oda's also built up the intrigue with the swords first by finally confirming that a black blade becomes that way. So we know we have, I think it's Mihawk's Yoru and the Shusui became black blades because it's basically the wielder's battle experience has been infused into the sword over their lifetime, which is basically me thanking alright, they've just put in a shit ton of hockey and they've been imbuing it in their sword for so long it basically just kind of absorbs in and gets trapped inside of it. And then we also get, more mention of it with Kawamatsu's backstory when we hear that the samurai of Ringo are gifted a katana the moment they're born and carry it till the day they die. And when Kawamatsu's digging it up, he knows that, I know it when he tells Gyakumaru, or the little fox thing, Onimaru was it? And he's just like, yeah, I know what I'm doing is sacrilegious. But what really struck me is, how he talks about the sword, and he goes, he mentions the custom of, when a samurai of Ringo falls in battle, their comrade will pick up their sword and carry it on with them, because a soul that resides in a katana makes a samurai strong. And he mentions that, it's too early to let the sword sleep. And I wonder if that's kind of a hint at this idea that by infusing the hockey into a blade, I wonder if the user can also impart a bit of their soul, their personality, whatever you want to call it, into the blade. And can someone interact with it in a way? Before I tie this all together, I don't want to get too much into the digressions again. I have to mention the last little intriguing tidbit with the swords, and that's what happens when Zoro is gifted Enma. We see the sword immediately sucks out all of Zoro's hockey, and you see his arm starting to shrivel up. It's getting absorbed out, and tries to exude it, and Hitetsu knows that, the sword has a mind of its own, and it takes a really strong wielder to kind of be able to control it. And of course, it doesn't stop there, because then we later find out that Hitetsu reveals that the Wado Ichimonji and Enma, two of the swords Zoro's are now wielding, were both crafted by Kuina's grandfather way back in the past, before he left Wano to go and found Zoro's village, Shimotsuki village in the East Blue. And to me, that seems like too much of a major coincidence to me, that Oda's kind of bringing in all these plot points from hundreds of chapters ago into Wano now. And I don't feel like it's just a little Easter egg thing where he's like, oh, look at these cool tiebacks to previous arcs, and that's where the connection ends. And I wanted to bring all this up because I think the main point I'm trying to get to here is in Alabasta we established that, inanimate or non-sentient objects like trees, rocks, the earth, the wind, whatever, have a breath or a distinct heartbeat. And Zoro even mentions, Mr. Steel even has kind of like a distinct breath of its own. And by being able to hear that breath is how he's finally able to unlock the power to cut steel. So this made me wonder, does that mean that swords or any inanimate object can manifest a will of its own? Or, since we know that hockey can be imbued into objects, creating things like the Black Blade, can the original user or wielder of a sword live on or pass their will on through their swords? And I think I brought this up on Twitter a long time ago. I don't know how many people follow me there or saw this when I originally brought this up. When I was talking about Thriller Bark, I was doing a read-through, I think almost a year ago now or further back. I was talking about how Zoro seemed to be talking to Ryuma's spirit through Shusui during their duel. Because one of the, the whole the sword will be happy with you as master, it's like giving it to him and all that. And so I wonder if this is partly an explanation for what cursed swords are, or how they're made, is that the original smith that made them imbued them with his hockey or his bloodlust when he's creating them, and that bleeds over into the next user, which causes them to start acting, impulsively or irrationally, or start lashing out with anger and bloodlust, which then will lead to their death, because it starts overriding their rationality and their sense of self-preservance and everything else, to cause them to try to just draw as much blood as they can, forcing them into situations where they eventually end up dead because they don't have the power to overcome whatever it is. And I want to quickly bring this up as a small aside where I thought this was a good kind of tie into this, is there's a Japanese legend regarding two famous swordsmiths. One was Muramasa and one was Masamune, where the former challenged the latter to a contest to see who can craft a finer sword. And so the way they did it was they both suspended their swords in the river with the edge facing against the current. So I think they tied it to a rock, edge facing this way, current going towards the blades. And Muramasa's sword, as it lay in the river, anything that came against the blade was immediately sliced in half perfectly. Whether it was a fish, a passing leaf, like even the wind, they say, was cut. And Masamune's sword was the exact opposite, where anything that touched it was completely swept by it, no damage to it whatsoever. And so Muramasa claimed that he was a superior swordsman because, oh look, my blade cut through everything while your blade cut through nothing, so my blade is obviously the sharper one and is obviously the better one. And a passing monk that saw this contest going by kind of told him off by saying, actually Masamune's sword was the superior one because it didn't cut anything that was undeserving or unworthy, while Muramasa's sword was bloodthirsty and cut everything irrespectively, without any regard for what it was cutting at all. And this really gave me vibes to Zoro Mr. One, where Zoro had that bit about a sword only cuts what its master desires. When he thinks back to that speech Koshiro gave him about, what to become a master swordsman or superior swordsman. And Koshiro kind of mentioned that, hey, a true swordsman is one who can cut nothing at all, right? Because his blade only cuts what he wants it to cut, not just anything that comes across it. All that said, the one caveat I have regarding that is Oda seems to have potentially mixed part of this idea with the new aspect of armament hockey that he introduced, which Hyogoro taught to Luffy, which is the new, flowing Ryo one where it's like more of a shock wave, rather than like an armor that's built around the user. And I bring it up because Hyogoro, I think, mentions when he did it that this hockey would let whoever used this hockey would let you cut through the thickest steel, as easily as slicing through butter, or you could, stop your sword from cutting through a piece of paper if you wanted. As long as the sword wielder willed it to be so or whatever. So Oda could just go the route of making it part of Zoro's training or development, that he just needs to start mastering this new kind of hockey, the same as Luffy, in order to kind of become, the great swordsman. I hope there's more to that. That seems a little bit kind of lackluster kind of power up and development for Zoro. But like I said, I don't really want to get into his development stuff right there. I'll just say the cursed sword aspect is still the only part of this that kind of remains unexplained. So I'm interested in seeing how that could play out. Before I forget, so two things before we move on to the next point I want to bring up about this specifically. The first one being that this is complete speculation on my part, but I found it curious that out of all of Zoro's swords, he has never once mentioned hearing or sensing the personality of the Wano Ichimonji. Because I think when he first got Shusui, he kind of mentioned, the sword's like a problematic child. It'll take some discipline to kind of get it to obey me and listen to me, or master it, whatever. He mentioned that the Kitetsu, there's something off with the Kitetsu. And again, he mentions kind of like a problem child that cuts whatever it wants. It kind of needs to be reined in. And so, the Wano Ichimonji is kind of the one sword he's never really mentioned in any regard with that. Not saying anything about its durability or its strength or its personality or anything like that. And this might be just me overthinking it too much. But I've been of the mind that maybe it's because he doesn't truly consider it his sword yet, and he still thinks of it as Kuina's sword, and he's kind of just holding on to it. And I wonder if that's going to be tied into maybe Zoro having not potentially grieved or processed Kuina's untimely death yet. Hence, his childish bickering with Tashigi and the way he treats her. And the Fire Festival, which, as Shinobu notes when they're doing the reconnaissance, being a ceremony to mourn and remember the dead. And as she notes in the manga goes, it is the time when our wishes and feelings reach them more than ever. Given that, Oda's now starting to bring back the ties by saying Kuina's ancestors from Wano, and that he's hinted in the SBS, I believe, as well, that there might be something about Zoro's past as well that he's going to bring up or address at a future point. Feels like it's going to be the perfect time for Zoro to kind of find some closure on Kuina's thing and finally kind of bury the hatchet with Tashigi. But again, speculation at this point. I can't really tell if we'll ever get an answer to that or not. And like I mentioned, I might do a small video edition to this one, just talking about what development I'd like to see for Zoro and how that ties into his dreams. But again, probably one for another day. I feel like there's enough content. And so, that was the first unaddressed plot point I kind of want to address that Oda might still do a deeper dive into. The second is something that I found really intriguing, especially because of a certain moment I'll address and talk about later. And that's the idea of masks that Oda brought up. And this was first explicitly stated as a theme when we get that one of the few great reveals and actual emotional moments in Wano thus far. He's when the citizens of Ebisu town, are grieving Yasue, and they're just laughing and laughing and laughing after they see this horrendous scene. Everyone's kind of questioning, what's wrong with them? Why are they laughing at a moment like this? And you find out that, Orochi's sick, twisted sense of humor meant that the Smile Devil Fruits, we find out that even after someone takes a bite from them, they still carry the after effects of the fruit, and if someone else takes a bite out of that, they all get cursed or affected with it the same way. Excuse me, take a drink of water. Right. Then we find out that the smile fruits are so aptly named because they rob people of all emotions except for laughter. And Shinobu says that the smiles the people of Bisu wear are actually masks that they can never remove for the rest of their lives. And then my interest in that was even more piqued when we later get the reveal that, Okiku is actually a transgender woman. And we have that moment in the prison where Hyogoro is like, tells the scabbards, take off your disguises, show them who you really are. All of them are taking off their disguises and their masks and everything, except for Okiku, who puts on this badass looking Hanya mask on her face. And then, apart from being way too deliberate a move to be coincidental, this is kind of where we get to the part of the video where I have to put a really, really big disclaimer when I'm talking about this specifically, because I really, really hate the argument of there's a reason that X character was introduced in a story. Because, a lot of people are complaining about SJWs ruining manga and inserting politics into manga, being like, oh, why does this character have to be gay? Why does this character have to be trans? Stuff like that. I'm firmly in the camp of you don't need a reason to have a character like that in a story, and that doesn't have to be a defining part of their identity. But OP is kind of the sole exception in that regard because of Oda's horrendous record with how he's treated and portrayed the LGBT characters in the series thus far. The specifics of which I don't really have time to get into in this video, but why all that representation is bad. And really, I'm not the best one to kind of speak on that and all the problems with said representation. But, like the horrendous stuff we've had, even with the, the fan favorite characters like Bon Clay and Ivankov, who, while not as bad as Oda's other characters, are still, still straddle a little problematic line. And the reason I wanted to point it out was Okiku is such an outlier in this thus far, because she isn't the horrific stereotype that the other transgender characters in this series are. And that really intrigued me, because there's only one other character that's highly speculative at this point, but I think it's like a very prominent fan theory, and we haven't got confirmation on it yet, but honestly, like, unless Oda's gonna pull a surprise twist because he doesn't want people guessing it, it's Sir Crocodile. I think everyone's kind of heard the theories, you know, even the joke ones about, oh, I bet Crocodile is Luffy's mom, blah blah blah. But those two are the only characters thus far, even if one is only implied to be transgender, that have not been overtly problematic or stereotypical or caricatures of the LGBT plus kind of demographic. And so I'm not going to get into like too many numerous theories about stuff I've had about this, but I kind of waffle on this one between wanting Oda to finally get LGBT representation right in his series, because I know there's a lot of transgender fans, LGBT fans of the series, that really want better representation in this series, and it's really, really disheartening for them whenever they read it, to see what kind of stereotypes and problematic things Oda puts into the series. But on the other hand, like, knowing Oda and knowing he doesn't really have the depth or the knowledge, and he doesn't have, I don't think, anyone he can go to acquire the said depth or knowledge, I really don't want him to tackle, kind of gender identity and all that kind of stuff with Okiku. And I just rather she be left alone, or her arc be very, very short. But I don't know, I just got so excited when I saw that moment, because it felt like it would tie into larger themes of progressiveness during Wano. Because we see right after that moment where she dons the mask, we see that, all these random samurai in Wano start misgendering her and dead naming her and things like that. So part of me was kind of hoping maybe Oda would do that, but honestly, I'm super torn about it at this point. I just want her to be treated well, I guess, is just my overall thing. I just want her to treat her well. But just wanted to point her out as being one of the first characters we kind of see with that. But she's not the only one that we see that wears a mask at various points in the story. Because we have Hitetsu, King, Hiyori. I guess at CP0 to this, because they also, all three of them wear masks. Who's Who, and I think Bao Hong as well. The little flying squirrel smile user that we saw. If I guess I want to really stretch this a bit to explore the mask themes. But they all ones who wear literal masks, and then you have a character like Hanjiro, who I'd also put into this as wearing one that's more metaphorical, especially for going with the whole, kind of black blob design that Oda gave him in the flashback to silhouette him, and his whole speech about how he doesn't have an identity and all that kind of stuff. And Hitetsu especially is interesting in that regard, because Brook noted that he found a poneglyph when he was scouring the castle, when he and Robin were there for Orochi's feast. And he said he found a poneglyph surrounded by Kokeshi dolls. And we know that when Hitetsu was introduced, he's introduced as being a Kokeshi doll collector. So Oda's obviously seems to be hinting at some secret that Hitetsu's hiding, or something that he knows he hasn't revealed yet. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how he brings that up and addresses it. Next one, King, I'll admit, is a bit more of a stretch with this theme, but given that Big Mom's kind of hinted at King's race being one of the ones she lacks in her kingdom, and one of the ones she wants, and Hitetsu potentially also being of a similar race, because the wings are very similar to what they both have, that might be some kind of tie-in again that Oda does address at some point. And then with Hiyori, Ibizu citizens, and Kanjuro especially, Oda's gone the roots of masks. And I think I think the common theme like between those two is like going the route of mask, basically disguising a person's true intentions or feelings. And minor digression is before I gotta get further. Some people might be wondering what the hell am I talking about with Hiyori wearing a mask. If you all remember, there's the shamisen player we see, I think in some of the interludes between the acts, playing the shamisen wearing a fox mask. We later find out that just wondering if I just had a brain fart and I said Okiku's wearing the fox mask. Hiyori's the one, the shamisen player we see in between the acts, wearing a fox mask, and we later see when she's playing for Orochi, she dons the same mask. And I think some of the samurai knows like, oh, you know, whenever she plays this song, she always puts on the mask. It's like, I wonder why. And then given in the flashback, you know, she was playing the shamisen for Oden, and she's playing that song. He's like, oh, you know, I hope you play that song for my funeral when I die. And she starts crying and all that. So I assume the whole thing Oda's going for is that when she plays the shamisen, she plays that specific song. She wears the mask to kind of hide the fact that she's crying because she doesn't want anyone else to see it. So I assume that, given that if we're going with the whole thing of, you know, mask kind of hiding a person's true feelings, all that, I expect at the end of the arc we'll see Hiyori finally playing the song with the mask off as she kind of plays the song for Oden again at the Fire Festival to kind of celebrate or mourn the dead. And given, yeah, I won't mention again, but I'll bring back Kiku quickly in this dimension, that the Hanya, I wanted to look up specifically if the Hanya mask has any specific symbolism that would kind of tie into Kiku specifically. But all I really got was it kind of can symbolize a complex array of emotions, from angry to sorrowful, depending on how you tilt the mask and how it looks. It can either look one way or the other. So yeah, like I said, I'm not really having high hopes for Oda doing anything good with that. As long as he doesn't royally screw it up, I guess it's the best we can hope for. Still an interesting tidbit. And with King and Hitetsu, it's too early at this point to tell what Oda's going for. But if we're going to extend the theme of like, alright, hiding their true identities, feelings, whatever, I wonder if it's going to be like, are they hiding their true identities, whoever they are, and maybe it's related, because I wonder if it's going to be like a Chondros kind of situation where their race was persecuted in the past for doing whatever. You know, and I wonder if all the Tengus, like, because this is a theory again I've had for a long while, quickly want to mention it, is I wonder if King is a swordsmith as well. Because this whole epitaph of, you know, the wildfire and the whole flaming persona and motif and everything made me wonder, like, alright, you know, does he use that to fan, like, the flames of a forge to get it super hot so he can start forging blades and things. So I wonder if they're kind of descended from a race of Tengus or people like that were renowned for being master swordsmiths, and maybe that's why they're persecuted, is, you know, people wanted or coveted their weapons and did the thing. Which, I should quickly mention this as an aside before I kind of dive into the last bit of the masks thing, which is Hitetsu confirming that he made the third generation Kitetsu always struck me as, always intrigued me for a single reason. And that was me wondering whether he deliberately made a cursed sword. As in, if he knows there's a technique or certain way to make a cursed sword. And if so, why would he make a cursed sword if that was the case? Like, you know, after how much he admonishes Luffy for, I don't want to touch it, you know, it's a cursed sword, it'll bring you bad luck and all that. Or is it the other route my train of thought took was, is it a situation where it's like he made a copy of a copy, and, you know, he basically kind of, I swear to look like he basically just mimicked whatever the style that the original Kitetsu used, and somehow whatever technique, whatever process he did, somehow ended up making the sword cursed as like a byproduct or an after effect he couldn't control. So I'm curious to find out if that's going to be part of Hitetsu's reveal, is that there's something about the cursed sword, like he deliberately made one, and he's been kind of hiding his true intentions or not. But like I said, there is no speculation at this point I could make. We'll have to kind of wait to see for how this raid plays out further before doing any of that. But last one I want to bring up is, again, bring it back around to the abusive citizens, because this is, again, another intriguing thing I found. Is given that Chopper's dream is to cure all diseases, it seemed really odd to me that no one kind of told him about the smile users and kind of the detrimental side effects of the fruit. You know, and yet, granted, it's not really like a disease in... Yeah, granted, it's not really a disease as we think of it, but given Chopper's kind of general disdain for Caesar already and everything he's done, kind of the research he conducted, it seems odd he's not involved with that subplot or plot line in any way, or he's not really hasn't really become aware of the fact that, you know, these people have been kind of genetically altered in that manner, especially because we know it is some kind of chemical mixture that caused them to become like this in the first place. So I find it odd that, you know, Chopper wouldn't be able to reverse the process somehow and be able to like free them from the curse. And I really hope that because the way I could see it ending in both of these ways, it kind of be a little bit to make me a little bit dissatisfied if this is how Oda ended it. Route A would be the arc ends, everyone celebrates, you know, the Beast Pirates are leave, packed up, go, whatever, Orochi's downfall's taken, etc., etc. Wano becomes a paradise again. And if the arc ends with the Straw Hats just kind of sailing off and made bye-bye, and the abusive citizens are like, oh, Oda's like, and the narrator's like, oh, but the abusive citizens were smiling freely and happily, you know, for the first time, and they weren't faking it or anything like that. That would just be so incredibly saccharine and disingenuous, and it just feel excuse me, my throat's running really dry. It would feel like such a cop-out to be like, yeah, we can't really do anything. Because it'd be almost like, you know, at the end of Thriller Bark, them saying, oh shit, we can't get your shadows back, guys. But I guess it's okay, you can just live on Thriller Bark forever. You know, you're free, you don't have to worry about Moria anymore. Or with the end of Dressrosa being like, well, we couldn't turn you back from toys, but hey, everyone's got their memories back, so they remember you, bye. So it'd be really weird to just kind of be like, oh, well, they're stuck with this affliction for the rest of their lives, they're just going to have to deal with it. We'll have to see. I really hope Oda's not going to go down that route. Or B, again, I'd be finding this really, really lackluster, is Chopper finds out about it, and like he cured the mummy disease when Luffy was in Udon prison, he just mixes together a few chemicals, like, here you go, cured, you're all good to go. That would feel really, really unsatisfying. Hope Oda doesn't do that. Oh, that's it. Final little tidbits as we get into it. So that's the two major unaddressed plot points I kind of see for Wano itself that I feel like Oda needs to address at some point. Which now brings me to the miscellaneous or extraneous events which involve the world government, CP0, Akainu, Blackbeard, and Moria. I'm going to talk about the latter first because it's the easiest, and that's because we know Moria has history with Kaido. And Oda could have easily, because once Thriller Bark ended, Oda could have easily finished Moria's story arc there and completely sidelined him and had him disappear in the vein of Krieg, Gin, Kuro, Arlong, you know, a lot of the basic early villains we met early on in the series. But the fact that he brought him back after the arc, you know, he had him in Marineford. The fact he had the whole unaddressed plot point of, he could just, couldn't forget about Marineford. He could have just killed him off in Marineford when Doflamingo was ordered to kill him. But the fact he's like, oh no, he became invisible and he went off to hide in the New World and he was spotted there again. The fact that Moria seems to have unfinished business with Kaido, I feel like it'd be kind of odd to not involve him in the latter's downfall at all. And there's been a prominent theory, you know, in the fandom for quite a few years now. I think first espoused by Greg Warner of the One Piece podcast, the one that does the official One Piece columns for Shueisha and all those guys. And that's the idea that Blackbeard is going to end up killing Kaido at the end of Wano, thus, kind of fulfilling Kaido's dream of finally being able to die. And given that we saw in the interlude that Moria was last seen with Blackbeard, and that Blackbeard offered to let Moria ride on his ship, and the fact that Blackbeard is apparently moving somewhere to take some kind of prize, I feel like that definitely has given this theory a lot more credence. Now that we know like Blackbeard's moving somewhere, Moria's back in the story, and is going to be involved somewhere. And I've always been a firm supporter of it since the beginning, so I feel like it's extra valid now. So, question is, when or if they will even show up in the arc. If it happens after the Straw Hats and Co. take down Kaido, Blackbeard kind of swoops in, kills him, swoops out again. Feels a little unsatisfying. I feel like Moria has to play a bigger role than just kind of coming in, seeing Blackbeard kill his hated nemesis and being like, alright, I guess I'm screwing off now, see you guys later. But, what could a potential Moria Blackbeard storyline in this arc look like further in? Before we get to that, we'll have to talk about a few of the other characters in this before we get into some speculation. So that brings us to CP0. So they have dealings with Orochi, much like Mother Carmel. Again, won't get into those theories, but I will add the caveat that if anyone is interested in tangential theories related to this, always feel free to hit me up at twitter.com/KingCocoaButter. I'm more than willing to toss out ideas or have a DM conversation. If you want to hear about my thoughts or speculate with me, I'm always open to that. So just putting the offer out there for anyone that wants to take me up on it. We see in the last interaction with Orochi when CP0 is there that he's gotten a little bit too cocky now in their dealings. As he demanded a battleship as payment for the weapons. And he's kind of mocking them, making fun of the fact that they now have to get their hands dirty, basically, by dealing with him directly, as as Doflamingo, having been captured, can no longer play the role of middleman. And it makes it kind of harder for them to hide their involvement in it. And when they try to protest that, battleship is too much and they can't afford to give him stuff like that, he tells them that with Kaido's protection, he doesn't fear the government or anyone else. And he doesn't need their patronage because Wano's self-sufficient and happy and all that, and he doesn't need them as much as they need him. And he tells them, next time you could ask for Vegapunk as payment, if he so wanted, because CP0 basically really needs him to kind of supply weapons and munitions and things and all that. And then we see later on when the training is happening right before the Fire Festival, we see that Drake is making his report to Kobe where we find out the whole thing about Sword, the secret Marine faction. And he mentions that he saw CP0 in the capital the other day. And this is where we get to kind of the interesting question speculation part. Because the only two reasons I can think of that CP0 would be in Wano in the capital is either A, they're there to drop off the battleship as promised to Orochi, or B, they were there so they could basically plant a spy in Wano to smuggle out information. Given its closed borders, they don't really know what's going on inside. And we know because we saw that the minor CP0 agent that tried to take out Morgans before he could publish the news about what happened at Reverie. We know they can disguise themselves easily as someone else. So I wonder if option B is the option B. So yeah, because of the disguise, it seems to me like option B seems more credible than option A. Especially because if CP0 had come to drop off the battleship for Orochi, just given the kind of person he is and the fact that he flaunts his wealth and his status so openly, I don't see Orochi being the kind of person to kind of hide the battleship as an ace up his sleeve or just put it out of sight somewhere until he needs it at some point. and we haven't seen the battleship anywhere when the Straw Hats were on their way to Onigashima, and we had that little bit with the naval battle. So I don't know why Oda would kind of hide that out of sight or not bring it up again. Well, there is another reason I can think of related to that for later, but yeah, I don't see why Oda would hide that the battleship at this point in the story if we really are getting to the climax. The arc is going to end here, so that's why I kind of lean towards option B seeming a little bit more credible than option A as to why CP0 is there. And like I said, this kind of ties into speculation I've had about Mother Carmel for the longest time. But I wonder if CP0, if they're there as spies in the capital, I wonder if they're starting to see Orochi as a liability they can no longer afford, and if they're looking for an opportunity to take him down and replace him with someone else. Because we know CP9 with Lucci and the rest of them have all become part of CP0 now, and we know their all specialization was assassination and infiltration, where some of them went undercover in Water 7 for the longest time. So I wonder if that's a hidden surprise that was going to spring on us, is that some of the members of CP9, now form part of CP0, are in Wano undercover, and we're going to see that. That said, too early again to speculate on what shape that's going to take, but I have always been of the mind there's going to be government involvement in Wano, in some world government involvement in Wano in some shape or form and going forward, which brings me to the next enigma of this, which is Akainu. I've been getting really, really suspicious of him and his actions in the interlude, because he seems way, way too offhand as of late, since he became Fleet Admiral. And I know a few of my friends on Twitter are kind of speculating about what this is, especially given that fans thought he'd be playing more of an antagonistic role ever since he ascended to the role of Fleet Admiral. And they kind of speculated and thought, okay, maybe this is because his hands are tied by red tape, politics, all that, and he literally cannot move. He literally can't do anything. But when he gets the reports that two of the emperors are going to team up, and that they used to be part of this, heretofore unheard of, at least to us readers, famous pirate alliance called Rocks, and that they're this badass group, and all the emperors, all the current emperors, used to be at one point part of this massive pirate crew, and took Garp and Roger's combined forces to kind of take them down and get them to dissipate. Seeing them talking with the return of Rocks and Big Mom and Kaido powering up and doing all that, and the fact he basically shrugged and he's like, yeah, we can't do shit, so it didn't seem like Akainu, his attitude seemed way too lax, especially when you think back to way back in the first half of the series, when Shanks and Whitebeard were going to meet, and the Marines were like, oh, we have to scramble our forces, we have to stop them and intercept them from meeting, this could be a catastrophe, we can't let this happen. And then later in Marineford, when Whitebeard himself and his crew and his allies managed to take on a vast majority of the Marines' naval forces, the three admirals, a good amount of their might, and were able to raise Marineford to the ground, which is one crew, it feels like the Marines would be taking the Emperors more seriously as a threat, especially if they know the two of them are going to be, ganging up and allying again. And when you couple this with Akainu when he's talking to Fujitora about the warlords being dissolved, and he's given his general disdain of pirates, and the fact that he told Fujitora told him that, one or the other, I can't remember which exactly, but one of them said, Akainu voted to have the warlords kept on, because it's kind of like a greater of the two evil situation. And Ishok was kind of like, well, this is the right move, and you'll see it's the right move. Again, it didn't feel like Akainu, given his disdain of pirates, like he'd want the warlord system kind of kept around, unless he was cooking up something in the background and having these pieces be moved too early was detrimental to his plans. Because we know that Akainu is a schemer and a plotter. So again, think back to Marineford, the fact that he psychologically messes with Squard to make him think that, to reveal the whole information about Ace being Roger's son, and the fact that Whitebeard didn't tell them, and he's going to betray his allies and all that. So, given that, and kind of given what we know after what happened with the Dressrosa, where the CP0 kind of did the whole Doflamingo's quitting the Warlords, he's back in. The Elder Star's not telling Akainu about that or keeping him in the loop, and Fujitora himself kind of doing the whole Marines apologizing for having let Doflamingo get to this point without stopping him, or without stopping or keeping a closer eye on him, and like the whole making the Marines look bad. I wonder if Akainu is basically playing his cards closer to his chest because he doesn't know who he can trust, or he only has a select close group of people that he trusts with his plans right now, and he's kind of just getting ready to move, but he wants to move on his own time when he can spring a surprise when no one's expecting it. And especially given the whole open Wano's borders, kind of throw back to the old Japan thing that's going on right now. I'm still of the mind that Akainu's role in Wano's grander scheme will be to play the role of Admiral Perry, basically using gunboat diplomacy to kind of open up Wano's borders. And if we, this is kind of when I want to go back to what I mentioned way at the beginning of the video, where if we take what the kings and queens at Reverie were saying at face value, and if the Marines really, and if we also take Akainu's whole bit about, Marines don't have the resources to take on more people than just the warlords and everything right now, and they put everything they have into that, then I feel like invading Wano is the best option for them. Because we know from Gyakumaru Onimaru, the whole band at the bridge, the Fox guy, in Wano, that Wano was coveted in the past for being called the Land of Gold, and a lot of people kind of wanted the resources and things that they have. We know that the weapons factories on Wano are producing munitions for forces the world over. And I really feel like taking over Wano would kill two birds with one stone, as give the Marines the weapons they need, to arm their conscripted soldiers and arm their boats and everything else, finally be able to take on the Emperor's forces and kind of eradicate pirates completely finally. And if they forcefully induct Wano into the world government, then they could also start just conscripting samurai into the Marines, which again, given that we've heard for a few arcs now about how the samurai of Wano have this reputation for being fearsome and powerful fighters, it feels like it'd be a win-win situation for the Marines to be like, alright, we're going to go there, we're going to take over these resources, gives them access to loads of sea stone which they can use to fight devil fruit users, gives them access to loads of weaponry which they can use to arm their forces, and if they do get the gold and the resources and things, again, that helps them fund their armies and things like that. So, this is kind of where I come back to option A from before when I was talking about Orochi. Given that CP0 promised him a battleship, I could see a similar situation similar to what happened with Blackbeard when he also bartered Jewelry Bonnie for a battleship with the Marines, where Orochi gets an unpleasant surprise where you have a fleet of battleships showing up, basically threatening to initiate a buster call on Wano and its combined forces to take them down, which is when they get his which is when Orochi gets his final payment, and they kind of threaten him into seceding to their demands. And the other kind of semi-direction I can see it going is if CP0 was saying they couldn't afford the battleship, I wonder if that's how Akainu will kind of get his hooks into them and find out what's going on and find out with the weapons factories and munitions and everything. Because as of right now, we know that he doesn't really seem to have an information source inside of Wano. I'll have to go back and look because I'm not sure if I remember if how the announcement that Big Mom and Kaido are teaming up got out to the Marines unless someone told them. I'll have to go look at that again, revisit it, and I might add that as an addendum to my next reaction video. But like I said, expecting some kind of Marine involvement in Wano, whether it happens during the raid, or slightly after the raid, or whether it happens after the Straw Hats leave. I feel like there's going to be some kind of Marine involvement, and there's going to be some kind of twist coming. But like I said, too early to kind of speculate on what that's going to look like. And last but not least, kind of speculation about the last missing key player in the Wano conflict, kind of the extraneous detail again, Cat Viper and Co. Now, I won't get into outlandish speculation that I have regarding certain characters affiliated with Whitebeard, Crocodile Bonnie, and Weevil, cough cough. If you're interested in my thoughts, like I mentioned earlier, if you want to DM me on Twitter for the speculation, I'm more than happy to share that. But that aside, given Whitebeard's connection to Wano, you know, his adventures with Oden, Izo joining his crew, possibly having had his final meeting and drink with Roger there, where Roger revealed what the One Piece was and like the existence of it to him. I feel like Whitebeard's story arc has to end on Wano, given that we've gotten so many deep ties to it now, and given that he's passed on. So this makes me kind of wonder if we're going to see the remnants of the Whitebeard crew showing up at some point potentially. Because if I remember correctly, I think it was an Oda interview that came out recently, like a few months ago, where he mentioned where he wanted to introduce more naval battles into the series. And I think he also noted that the big incident that the Grand Fleet was involved in, because post Dressrosa, when the narrator was talking about the Grand Fleet, they mentioned that, you know, the Grand Fleet's going to be a part of some major incident at some point in the future that would kind of define the era going forward. And I think Oda said in a recent interview that the incident that they're involved in would happen very soon in the manga. And given that he's been talking about how important Wano is in the endgame interviews and about how he wants to finish the series in 5 years, really wishful thinking, Oda. But let's entertain him and pretend that's a realistic idea. It makes me more convinced we're going to see a big battle in Wano between all these disparate forces before things start to go to shit and before we really start ramping up to the climax of the One Piece story overall as a whole. So, with all that said, could Wano be ending soon? Will the raid end up being successful, and will Kaido and Big Mom go down in this arc at this moment? I guess that's really kind of the question I wanted to speculate on answering this video. So the easy answer first, I don't for a second buy that Big Mom is going down this arc. I still think that it makes more sense for her to follow the Straw Hats to Elbaf, kind of finally bringing her arc full circle, you know, back to the land of her birth, where we'll finally get the whole reveal about what's going on with the past, what really happened with Mother Carmel, things like that. But that is mostly, I think, my speculation. I think a large majority of the fandom thinks that Big Mom will go down here. I don't see it. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Oda's not setting up the right atmosphere for it feeling like two of the emperors are going down. I'm not saying it's unrealistic or unbelievable, but you have to take some pretty big liberties to make it happen. But as for the raid success, I am honestly 50-50 right now. Narratively, it seems very likely that's going to be the big dumpy climax of the arc. We've got the big dramatic flashback, characters are moving into position, the fire festival is here. We know that's been hyped up as like the main big event. The full moon, I think someone mentioned the full moon is out, which means the Minks are going to be able to go Sulong, which will probably give the Straw Hats and their allies the advantage in forces. Oda's really done a lot of build up to try to make it seem like the raid's going to end with the last two chapters where he's had the samurai sink their own ships, and he's talking about how Orochi, has put his guard down a lot, and the beast pirates really seem to be unprepared for the invasion that's currently going on. So that said, still, it feels too easy. Like, I know I keep coming back to that and harping on that one point, because I've criticized the arc before for this several times, as I mentioned, because the Straw Hats have really been too blasé and lackadaisical towards taking on two emperors, a group which Oda has hyped up to Kingdom Come, relentlessly talking about how strong they are, how powerful they are, how they're like, powers onto themselves in the new world, and you either fall under their influence or die. That's the only two choices. And and they have been, and they are veteran, fighters and players in this world where they have held their rank for numerous years. So if they go down too easily, it really won't feel earned to me, given all the build-up that's happened so far. Especially when Oda talked about the new world, it's like, oh, we have all these people like Moria, Crocodile, even Zeph, or even Krieg, talking about how the Grand Line was so bad, and the new world's even worse in comparison. They call the Grand Line Paradise because of that. But so far, there's been absolutely no tension thus far on this arc. The Peace Pirates have pretty much been a joke, and have had very little characterization or depth compared to a lot of the past villains in previous arcs, and they haven't really been established as a threat. Like I said, with Queen being, the plague person, and the plague that Queen created just being cured by Chopper like that really undercut a lot of the threat the Queen was supposed to represent. So, is this a deliberate move by Oda? I can't say. Can he still make the raid climactic and emotional? Maybe, but again, like, this arc has been less than impressive in that regard, and it hasn't had the same feeling to it as the previous ones have had. And right now, there are too many variables that could go either way, and we need to see kind of how it plays out. And last thing I kind of want to mention before I forget, and I'll wrap this up, that kind of ties into the extraneous theories I have, is I'm also intrigued by the skyboats for the Fire Festival. Because it really gave me blimp vibes, and as soon as I saw that, I immediately thought of like, would the Straw Hats be able to mount an aerial raid on Onigashima? Is that going to be the big twist of Orochi's plan not having come to fruition? Is that the Straw Hats knew about it, they planned something else, they knew about the bridges and they just sailed over it. Instead, he gave us the Kinemon reveal, which, fine, whatever, but maybe those will come back at some point. And I'm really hoping Straw Hats face an epic defeat at Onigashima, and they'll need to fall back, regroup with reinforcements, and take the Beast Pirates on in a round 2. Because if the entire Grand Fleet shows up, I think it's like 5,600 people or so plus. So if the Grand Fleet shows up, along with Cat Viper and the remnants of the Whitebeard Pirates, that could be the reinforcement numbers they need to kind of shore it up to go around 2 with the Beast Pirates. And 2, I guess, additional little addendums before I kind of wrap things up here. I'm also disappointed with how little, like, I hope this doesn't make me sound like super bloodthirsty or just like dark and stuff, but I'm disappointed with how little torture we've actually seen kind of taking place in this arc. Because, again, speculation here, but when we saw Moria in Chapter 0, Prime Moria, he's really built. One thing I've noticed the lack of was he doesn't have those stitches running from, his neck downwards to, I assume, his sternum and below. And I always kind of thought that was a result of Kaido and his forces, given that someone mentioned earlier in this arc that Kaido likes to kind of torture people and break their spirit in order to force them to join his crew. I kind of feel like that was what happened to Moria. And this is kind of me getting super dark. I wonder if Kaido also used Moria's own scissors, like his own scissor sword weapons, to kind of bisect him in half from here to there. And those little stitches he has are basically a way that he sewed himself back up. And because we know that Moria lost his crew at Kaido's hand, like it scarred him so badly that he created zombies. Because like, oh, zombies can never die, they can never disappoint you, never leave you alone. And he warned Luffy that he's going to face something similar. You know, that he's not ready for it. He's too arrogant. He's going to be taken down a peg. So I wonder if we're all finally going to see all that play out. And the last little tidbit I want to mention just occurred to me. Figured I'll mention it just as an off chance thing. Is the kind of kabuki act and play structure, because I know this has also been kind of a huge debate within the community itself, is how many acts is Wano going to be? Is it going to be 3 acts or 5 acts? And I think it's because, I think like thematically Wano has like it's like Ha-Q something. There's like a 3-act like thematic structure for how like the stories play out. Like a thematic underline for how a lot of the Kabuki stories play out in Kabuki. And then I think the actual acts themselves, like a lot of the plays have a 5-act structure, with the ones kind of introducing the world, 1 and 2 like introducing the world, I think 3 culminating in like some kind of big tragic moment, 4 having a short battle and a wrap up, and 5 kind of like the quick conclusion. So again, this is where I kind of get into 50-50, because it could really either play out either way this moment, because we're in Act 3 right now. So arguably, I know a lot of people arguably saying that the Oden flashback was like the big dramatic moment, and then now we're getting into the battle, like the quick battle before the downfall and everything gets wrapped up. That's possible. That might be what's going on here. But because we're also only in the 3rd act right now, and the raid is going to get underway. You know what, let me look up quickly what the Kabuki one was. And because the raid is going underway right now, the Straw Hats and forces getting their asses handed to them after all the big setup that they've done. That could be the big kind of dramatic thing of Act 3, right? So you're quickly looking at Wikipedia. Yeah, so the concept is Jo Ha-Q, which states the dramatic patience should start low, slow, speed up, and end quickly. So that could be how it plays out, especially because I think Oda's had chapters called Jo and Ha so far. I don't know if we've got a chapter called Q yet. That might be something that happens later on. I'll have to look it up and see whether it's coming or not. It also says nearly every full-length play occupies 5 acts. First corresponds to Jo, an auspicious and slow opening which introduces the audience with the characters and the plot. The next 3 acts corresponds to Ha speeding events up, culminating almost always in a great moment of drama or tragedy in the 3rd act, and possibly a battle in the 2nd or 4th acts. And the final act corresponding to Q is almost always short, providing a quick and satisfying conclusion. So Oda could really play it either way, but I'm gonna say I'm hoping it goes towards the 5-act structure, because I feel like this arc needs that. I feel like the Straw Hats need to face a defeat that humbles them, just given their attitudes in arcs thus far. But Oda could also just make that happen with losses and things happening generally during the raid itself. I really have no way of speculating until we see it play out further. So with all that finally said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I just want to note, thus far I have been less than enthused and impressed with Wano, because apart from a few stand-up moments, it's been a very dull and overburdened arc in my opinion. I feel like Oda's been introducing too many characters, and he's been rushing through it and kind of detracting and taking away from kind of the main cast and their development in this arc. But that said, I hope he can nail the finale, because if he is right and this is going to be a linchpin for what's to come, and it really is going to set up, like, you know, the last part of this story and kind of start building up to everything he's been setting up for 20 plus years, he really needs to step up his game, because honestly, first half of the series was a lot more tense and emotionally fraught, I feel like, than a lot of the latter half of the series. So hopefully we'll see what it goes from there. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if there's anything you agree, disagree with, have counterpoints on, let me know in the comments below. If you think the raid's going to fail, be successful, why not, why, arguments for, against, whatever. I'd be more than happy to entertain any kind of diverse ideas. And as always, if you like my content, then please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And quick note, I'm going to try to keep working on the Oden script for my video. I'll admit right now it's kind of 50-50 for me whether I even want to finish the video on the analysis of Oden or not. So I'll see how I feel. I might do a channel update kind of talking about my feelings on that, if I'm going to finish it or not. So look forward to that. And I think there's no One Piece chapter this week, so this is basically taking the place of my reaction review for this week until we get to get back to it next week when the chapters come back. And until next time, this is Ash. I will talk to you all later.